Here it comes. Times you love the Brian Show. It's time for Brian Show. It's time for the Brian. Time for the Brian Show. No matter where you look, it's time. Nothing's gonna stand in my way. It's time for the Brian. Time for the Brian. It's time for the Brian Show. Brian Show. It's time for the Brian Show. Brian Show. It's time for the Brian Show. Time for Brian Show. Brian, nothing's gonna stop me now. Nothing's gonna stop me now. All right. Let's put this bad boy on Facebook. Say I'm live. We're all live. We are ready to roll, man. Having fun. Man, I need some more RAM in this computer because it's moving slow. Let me tell you. There's a lot of stuff going on, though. I'm moving slow tonight. Well, my computer's moving slow tonight. Welcome to the Brian Show. I am glad that you are with me tonight. Let me just fire off a little. There we go. Let me going live. A little post action. There we go. And that way I can get that posted. So if anybody needs a link, there it is. All right. Let me get where I need. Okay, I'm the only viewer, I think. So it's the Brian Show. It's our fourth show. It's the spooky Halloween show. There's going to be a special guest later on, but I just wanted to introduce myself. If you are tuning in for the first time, or you're listening later on the podcast, I am able to, I think, by the end of the week or the beginning of next week, I should be on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Look up the Brian Show, and there's the logo. You can look it up. It's yellow and blue, and it says the Brian Show. So thanks, Tom Hanks, to everybody that was listening in and is listening in and has listened in. And if you have a comment or something, you can always listen. You always list it write it down in on YouTube, and then you can always reach me at thebrianshowlive@gmail.com, or there's a Twitter I set up, which is the Brian Show 2, I think. The Brian Show 2, but again, look for the telltale yellow logo. It's been quite a week. Let me tell you, it's been quite a week. I just got back from Detroit, and it was fun. I had a good time. My wife and I went there, and I saw some bombed out Detroit stuff, and Detroit downtown was there's a nice house, and then right next to it is a house that looks pretty run down, and but they're getting there. They're getting back on their feet, so that's good to see. Let's see. I was there. Went to the Henry Ford Museum. That was cool. I didn't realize just how freaking huge the Henry Ford Museum was. And I guess I should have realized it based on the fact that they house freaking cars. There, ding, got a ding. And cars, and there's even a train, a huge train what is it called? I don't know, like the main locomotive with a few boxcars behind it, and it was mother effing humongous. It was just massive, and you're standing next to it, and I guess you don't really get a feel for how big these things are. And they had planes in there too. They had a famous plane, one that similar to what Amelia Earhart was flying, and thank you, and there was one, the Sikorsky helicopter, and they had a video of him of Sikorsky flying it or attempting to fly. It was pretty cool. So I'm not big into the engineering stuff. And maybe I should be. Stuff mystifies me, but man, it's really impressive. Other than that, it's just been a normal week. How has your week been? How are things going for you? Something I was thinking about earlier was I'm glad and this was because I was in the airport, and we get out and at the Detroit airport, whatever it's called. We get out and we're waiting for our friend to pick us up, and there are people that just like come out there and they just, fumbling around trying to get to that cigarette as quickly as possible. And it made me realize that, man, I'm glad I don't smoke anymore, because that is a habit that stays with you. And it's a habit that you have to feed. Probably not unlike, I think I read somewhere that heroin, it's as addictive as heroin. And then you got the people that are vaping now, that apparently the level of nicotine in that is much higher than a cigarette. So people are turning back to cigarettes because they're trying to cut back on the vaping, because the vaping is hard to quit. But it just reminded me of I quit smoking. I smoked for a long time, longer than I should have, and I probably should have never started. No, probably about it. I should never have started, but I did, and I smoked until 2007. So that was 12 years ago, and I haven't had a nary a puff of anything since. That includes weed, man. But I remember distinctly the feeling of anxiety that you would get if you realize you didn't have enough cigarettes, or you weren't around a store, or you were stuck inside somewhere, or you were stuck inside eating or something where you had to go and get cigarettes, or wanted to smoke a cigarette and you didn't have any, and it was just a big pain in the ass, and it kind of made you feel about 2 feet tall, because you're like a slave to this thing. It's dictating what you do. And so I kind of felt sorry for those people that walked out and the first thing they do is, oh man, I gotta have that cigarette. Because back in the day, not too long ago, you could smoke in airports, up until 20 or 30 years ago. And then they designated rooms, and I remember there were like designated smoking rooms that were just like a cloud of, just looked like a smog in that glass enclosed room. And then finally, I don't think there's anywhere that you can smoke in an airport anymore. I don't think. So I remember many lifetimes ago, I had a job where I had to fly. It was just like an hour and a half flight south from where I am, and it doesn't matter what I was doing, but let's just say I was down in the bowels of a cruise ship, filming it. So it was kind of interesting. I'd never done that before, but I did see where all the poop went. That was something that was eye-opening, and you could see it sloshing around in there. But anyway, that's gross. But I remember I smoked at the time, and this was after September 11th, so there was all those security indignities that we endure, and so I got through security, and then I realized, oh man, I got a half hour till my plane leaves. I'm gonna smoke a cigarette, and I went looking for a room or some kind of outlet where I could smoke, and there was nothing. So I made the decision to exit the airport, leave the secure area with all my stuff, and then go outside, have that cigarette. I might have had 2 cigarettes just to make it worth it. And then I had to go all the way back through again, do the same thing, and go back through security. And I just remember thinking, this is so stupid. Like, this is the dumbest thing. Why did I do that? What a stupid, pointless thing this is. And then I didn't stop smoking for like another 3 or 4 years. So I didn't learn. But it was, I felt sorry for those people. So
shut up!
It is kind of what it is. So, what else? What else has happened this week?
You must be punished with your ass.
Oh, what the hell was I talking about? I don't know what I meant by this, but anyway, I when I run in the morning, and actually riding me because I was in Detroit, I saw a guy, and in the morning I see these guys. They have like they have lights in the morning on their recumbent bikes, and so they have recumbent bikes that they bike around on. And a recumbent bike, if you look it up, is a bike that has I think, well, actually, I can't remember if it's the same thing, but the ones that these guys in the morning drive, they pedal with their feet. The one I saw in Detroit, I think it was a guy that used his hands to pedal it, but I can't be. But anyway, they were like recumbent, reclining, that kind of thing. And I was just thinking, like, what goes through somebody's head when they want to buy one of those? And they're thinking, like, well, I don't want to like really exert myself. I don't want to, do anything that would jeopardize me breaking a sweat. But I want to get out there at the height of a toddler and pal around my neighborhood. But I don't want to have to drive. And I'd like to lay down while I'm doing it. And so here's what I think I'll do is there's this thing called a recumbent bike, and I will just sit back and let her ride. And that way I've achieved my goal of not exercising, getting outside, not sweating, and looking goofy. So whatever the people think when they're with their recumbent bike is something else. And tomorrow's Halloween. That's kind of interesting. It's pretty scary around here, so I'm gonna have a little spooky something for you in a little while. Something to kind of get you in the Halloween spirit. All Hallows Eve is Halloween, right? So today is All Hallows Eve. Or is today All Hallows Eve and then tomorrow's Halloween? And then, or is All Hallows Eve the day after Halloween? But that wouldn't make any sense. Maybe the November 1st is All Hallows Day. I can't remember. It really doesn't matter. But I got something spooky for you. And I think you'll enjoy it. And let me see what else. Let's see what else I was writing down. Because I can't think of things if I don't, or I can't remember things off the top of my head, so I got to write them down. And sometimes I just write down a sentence and I'm like, what the heck was I talking about? But one thing I have been thinking about is the show Sopranos. The Sopranos. I never watched it when it was on. I didn't have HBO. I didn't catch it on rerun. So I've been catching up with it, and I'm on about the middle of the third season now, and it's really good. It's a really good show and well written and a lot of good acting, and it's about the mob, but it's about so much more. But something I noticed very early on is that there is a ton of eating. Like every if you watch the show or you're rewatching the show, pay attention to how much people are eating at any given time. I don't think that you can go you can't go more than one or two scenes without something happening where Tony Soprano is eating breakfast, or Tony Soprano is eating lunch, or then they're at the strip club, of course, and then Tony's and he's eating at the strip club, and then the other guys are eating dinner, and then the other guys are eating at the strip club again, and then other guys are. And then he's eating dinner with the family, and then Carmela's cooking something, and then they're going into the refrigerator, pulling out manicotti and all kinds of things. And so there's been multiple scenes where, they're talking, and then one of the characters gets into the refrigerator and pulls something out. So, that's the way it is. So. I just thought that was interesting that there was it's not really a focus on eating. It's not like it's part of the show, but it's almost its own character because there's so much that happens during meals. So and I understand they gotta, and a lot of those guys on that show are some heavyweights. So it's not a stretch to think that they are. That they would eat a lot all the time, because what else you got to do? You got to wait for, your prostitutes to get off work or whatever it is. However they make money, I think he says waste management, so they're always eating, and most of the time it looks good. Sometimes it doesn't look good, but most of the time it looks pretty good and pretty. Makes me want to go to New Jersey and try the pizza and the Italian food. I'm sure it's pretty darn good. Come on, computer. Computer is being slow. There we go. Okay. And then, again, tomorrow's Halloween, so something else I was thinking about. I should just call this show Something Else I Was Thinking About, because that's basically what this show is. It's something. It's. I was thinking about something that I want to talk about, and then that's what I do. So there's, as far as Halloween goes, there's this thing where, and it's been an urban legend as long as I can remember. I don't think it's anything. It's anything that is new or novel. My cat is falling, but he's on my lap. New or novel, but it's the urban legend that people are going to put drugs in your apple or your candy, and they're going to poison your kids, or the razor blades thing. And so
Halloween sucks.
And so. It's been, the idea has been around for a long time, but it reminded me that it's never happened. Because people aren't going to waste their hard-earned dollars to go and purchase drugs that they're not going to consume to put into candy, or I mean, nobody's going to eat an apple from some stranger, but to somehow place into candy and then hope that the kids ingest it for what aim? That they get high for a little while, or they get sick, or it doesn't make any sense. But the broader issue is that, to me, this urban myth is a perfect example of capitalism, and or at least one tenet of capitalism, because part of capitalism is, I think it was Ayn Rand, like rational self-interest. Like, people only do things that are in their own self-interest, and I don't know that that's true. If you look at every Republican that is voting today, that's not a billionaire. But from a purely ideological standpoint, it's not rational for somebody to use their money to purchase drugs, to do something that would actively harm somebody else for no benefit. Now, a cigarette company will use their capital to purchase tobacco, sell it in the form of cigarettes, in the hopes that people get sick, and then they'll replace those smokers with new smokers once the smokers die. That's rational because they're making money. It's not rational for somebody to take, I don't even know what, I think this time it's marijuana, but I've heard razor blades, which aren't a drug, but, heroin, cocaine, just pills. In the 80s, they had commercials with like these multicolored pills and they look like vitamins. Whatever drug you can think of. Ice, Spaz, Blue Monday, Vase, glass, things around my living room, lamp, soiled diapers, soiled crack, soiled diapers, all these things, these drugs that people aren't going to put into aren't just going to buy to basically give away for no good reason. So I just thought that was interesting. That's another thing I'm going to call the show is I just thought that was interesting. Because that's my cat again. Because I realized that along with I should just pause there, but I'm learning as I go. I use these phrases and they're just, they're fallbacks that I don't have to think about, but I probably should. So why don't we bring in the special guest? Let me go get her.
Sometimes the world looks perfect, nothing to rearrange. Sometimes you just get a feeling like you need some kind of change. No matter what odds are this time, nothing's gonna stand in my way. This flame in my heart, like a long lost friend, gives every dark street a light at the end.
Halloween sucks, Halloween fucking sucks, your costume sucks.
On the wings of my dream, rise and fall. On the wings of my dream, the rain and thunder, the wind and haze, I'm bound for better days. It's my life, my dream, and nothing's gonna stop me now.
Nothing's gonna stop me now. That's the theme of this show. Nothing's gonna stop me now. I don't care if I have 0 listeners like I do right now, or I have one. I don't know who it is. So thank you for listening. But hopefully I'll have more people that will tune in later and get the podcast. You want to get next to that mic?
Hello, hello, hello.
Here, let me turn you up.
Hello, hello, hello.
And what is your first name?
My name is Kat.
And are you related to me in some way?
By marriage only.
By marriage only, okay.
Not by blood.
Not by blood. We could be, but that would be gross. I mean,
mean,
we've
maybe.
never taken a blood test, so we
Maybe-
can't say
maybe
for
not
sure.
that gross.
It may not be that gross.
Wink.
Wink.
I mean, Cersei and Jamie made it work. Is all I'm saying.
That's true. They did. And look how well they ended up. So I brought you on because we went to see a live podcast a couple weeks ago.
We sure did.
And what was the name of that podcast?
Last podcast on the left, which I have to this date never actually listened to.
Yeah, and I thank you for agreeing to go with me.
It was your birthday.
It was my birthday, and it was my birthday week, and I was really it was right after my second show, I think, and it was fun. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. It was a very happy crowd, which I think says a lot about the podcast itself because when you listen to a good podcast, it is informational and it's also, I mean, in my opinion, it's informational, but it's also like you're hanging out with friends.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was just so happy to be there that it was a happy group, including the guy sitting next to me.
That's right. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that guy, not me. It was a hirsute crowd too, wasn't it?
Very bearded, yes.
Very bearded.
Yeah.
It
It was a bearded crowd.
was a very bearded crowd. Very
Craft beer
very
fans.
craft beer fans. Exactly.
Fans of plaid and craft beer and beards.
And black T-shirts.
It's the now look.
Yeah, sure. And then I didn't see too many chain wallets, but
No chain
lots of
wallets
tattoos.
are dead. Yeah. You know, it was like vaguely hipster, but not as dedicated. It's like hipster light.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. The last podcast on the left is a very successful podcast that I've been listening to probably for about 6 months or so. It was kind of a lark that I decided to go see it live. Never seen a live podcast before, and I was curious to see what they would do. But it's 3 guys, and they basically go over the these any kind of crazy topic you can think of, but they focus on serial killers. They focus on cults, religions. They just did a really good series on Mormonism. They also focus on UFOs and Bigfoot and conspiracy theories, right? And so I'm not that interested in UFOs or conspiracy theories, so I was curious to see what they were talking about, and much to my I won't say disappointment, but much to my chagrin. Well, that's kind of a disappointment. They didn't touch a lot on the stuff that I had listened to. So
I would say you were a little disappointed.
I was a little disappointed.
Not greatly disappointed.
No, and I had a good time and it was entertaining. I just was not as familiar with what they were talking about.
Well, I mean, I think that live podcasts try and get original material.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that they generally, and I've never been to one, but I've listened to some recordings of live podcasts, and they tend to try and get an original topic so that the audience is surprised.
Yes.
But I think what you're saying is maybe it was more conspiracy theory and wacky than like historical? Information based?
Yeah, I mean, it's partly that. I mean, they definitely had a shtick, but
They did have a shtick.
I was the one that and you got me the shirt for my birthday.
Can we link to that in the show notes? Is that a thing that we can do?
Yeah, sure, we can. And I had the shirt. I was the dork that was wearing the shirt, but I was the only one that had it in green. Mm-hmm. Everybody else had it in black.
They were selling it in black.
Yeah.
At the show.
Whoops.
And I got it for you in green because I have excellent taste.
You do. So there was you had mentioned earlier there was a guy that was sitting next to you that
What, can I set the scene?
Yeah, please
Okay.
do.
So it's at Tampa Theater, which is a 1920s theater in downtown Tampa, and 1920s people were tiny, and the seats are really tiny, and they've renovated the theater in recent years, but the seats are still really tiny. They wanted to keep the original seats for some ungodly reason. And so it's kind of like being on an airplane where you can't share the armrest and your knees are up in your throat. And and I had
And you can't walk in front of people.
right.
like-
Everyone in the row has to get up if someone is getting up
Yeah.
to go to the bathroom or whatever. And so I had Brian to my right, and I had an empty seat to my left for a while. And then homie shows up with 2 drinks and no company,
Yeah.
and a poster and a bunch of t-shirts, and he's a young kid in his 20s. He's got like spacers in his ears. He's like, I don't know, he probably has a bike. He's like one of those types. And
Tall, skinny.
and homie was drinking.
Not only was he drinking, he had 2 beers in his hand.
Right. Okay, so I mentioned that to get up and go to the bathroom, everyone who is sitting, to your right or to your left, whichever way the aisle is, everyone has to get up. It's a community endeavor. So during the course of an hour, he got up no fewer than 4 times. And it was me, Brian, and 2 other people who had to get up. So he made 4 people, not including himself, get up every time he went to get a drink, and he would come back with 2 drinks at a time. But that wasn't necessarily, that's a lot. It's also really expensive, so I don't know how he's affording it. But
And there were liquor drinks, too.
There were liquor drinks too, and beers. So he would
Did
have
he
like
have beer,
a beer.
too? Okay.
He apparently kept spilling them on the girl sitting on his left. He spilled on me once, but I'll get to that. But he was also really, really high. So he started out really, really high. And even at one point, he's like, I'm so baked. And it's like, yeah, I can tell.
Yeah.
You didn't need to let me know, but thanks. And then he got up and got, if we're saying 4 times and it was 2 drinks per, maybe 8 drinks in an hour, kind of a lot. So I made some notes.
Yes.
If I may consult
your notes.
my notes.
Tell us about what you experienced sitting directly next to this maniac.
Well, I'm going to start out with saying, when you're sitting next to an incredibly drunk dumbass, you can choose to look at it at least one of 2 ways. 1, you can get enraged, and 2, which is the option I chose, you can focus on the utter absurdity of the situation and just decide that it's hilarious. So that's what I did, because I was trapped in close quarters with this, I don't know, just this dummy. Okay, so he was doing like call and response, but nobody was calling, and he was responding a good 5 to 10 seconds delayed. So they would say something, they would make a joke, the audience would laugh. A solid 5 seconds later, he'd go, ha, fuck yeah. And then he would just say, fuck yeah, just for no reason, a lot, but like obviously talking to the performers.
And we were a significant distance back. They couldn't hear us.
We were not close.
Yeah, they couldn't hear him.
Close.
They could not hear him, even if he screamed.
He was sort of holding his beer, so I was sitting to his right. He was holding his beer in his right hand, and it was just at a full tilt, like, I don't know, a 45-degree tilt. And so it started spilling on me, and I was like, yo, 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 and I pushed his hand away. Then he like insisted on handing me his brand new t-shirt to blot it up. And I was
that
like,
nice of him.
I was like, no, that's okay. And he's like, no, it'll make it better. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Wonderful. At one point, I think this was around when they were talking about Michael Jackson. There was something about Michael Jackson. And in a completely inappropriate part of the talk, he just started going, man, fuck that guy. It wasn't about Michael Jackson, because I agree with that sentiment. Fuck that guy. He was like, man, fuck that guy. Fuck that guy so hard. But it wasn't clear who he was saying needed to be fucked so hard. Then they were saying something, they made a joke, and he started saying, that's just a really weird growth on your head. At this point, it was 9:45. When did the show start?
It's like 8. It's supposed to be 8.
Okay, so we're talking like an hour.
They started about 8:10, 8:15.
Okay, hour and a half in. The people around us start to get pissed off. Like, people are turning around and glaring and going, shh, you know? And I'm like, oh, not everybody thinks this is as funny as I do.
Yeah.
Um,
They actually want to hear the show.
they actually want to hear it. They're actually excited. I mean, I was excited to be there, but like they paid
They
a
were
lot of
super
money to
fans.
be here.
Yeah.
And so that was at 9:45. At 9:46, he was escorted out by police.
Right. And so he was there.
And everybody in our area clapped.
So he was there the majority of the time. But, I don't know. There's probably a half hour left after he was kicked out.
Oh, yeah. I'm just glad that I was a buffer and that to you, not to anybody else. And that he was spilling his beer on me and not you.
And there was a girl next to him they was spilling the beer on too, right? So you had a conversation with her, a brief one.
She got the brunt of the beer,
Yeah.
the beer spillage. And apparently he was like man-spreading into her whole situation. And
Which isn't hard to do
pissed.
because they're like airline seats. They make airline seats seem roomy, but ample. But yeah, he was crazy. It was.
I don't know how he got home. I hope that he went next door to the hub and continued to drink, because I don't know.
I don't see how his liver can handle. I think he would have gotten alcohol poisoning, but
I think
something.
he must have lost his poster on the way home. I think he would have woken up the next day and been like, the fuck is my poster, man?
My name's Jerem. I collect posters. little 30 Rock. All right. Well, any other thoughts on the whole thing?
I give live podcasting 2 thumbs up. Not just because you're doing a live podcast.
And it's
I'm just going to call it a podcast. I hope that's okay.
That's fine. It eventually will be. I think the most interesting part that they did was they talked about Charles Manson and Mama Cass and stuff that I had heard about. So that was pretty cool. But
I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
The contention is that the CIA provided acid to the hippies, including Charles Manson, and there are all these conspiracy theories. And like, as with all conspiracy theories, like there is some truth to it. And the CIA was doing some crazy shit. And I'm not at all a conspiracy theorist, but I believe that it is common knowledge that the CIA was doing some crazy shit back then. They probably still are. I don't know. But
they're probably listening in right now. I hope they're listening.
Hey CIA, rate
CIA.
us on iTunes.
Yeah,
5 stars.
Give us a 5-star rating.
It can really help other people find the podcast.
All right.
I've just listened to a lot of podcasts. Oh, after this break, you're going to hear from Blue Apron. We're going to tell you how much we love Blue Apron and give you a code.
Promo code The Brian Show Cooks.
The Brian Show 20.
I would love to be sponsored by Blue Apron.
Hey, Blue Apron, give us a call.
I know.
cook. Here's the thing.
I have tens of listeners.
Blue Apron, HelloFresh, all of you guys. I love to cook. I cook all the time. So I don't order a Blue Apron that often, but when I do, it's really fun. So like I could give a real heartfelt advertisement. I'm just saying.
You could really sell the copy.
I could. I'm just saying. Help us help you.
Okay.
All right, Brian. I had a lovely time.
Thank you.
I'll see you in bed.
All right. Wow. Hey.
For sleeping.
She said for sleeping. I hope it's for more. Actually, I'm usually tired at the end of this. I'm not into hanky panky. Or maybe I will be. I don't know. We'll see.
Shut up!
All right. How far are we into this bad boy? So yeah, so last podcast on the left was pretty fun. I really enjoyed it. And now, if you want to join us, we're going to get a little spooky.
Halloween sucks, Halloween fucking sucks, your costume sucks. Whip your ass. Whip. 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 Whip your fat ass.
Here's something to scare you about. Here's something that will strike fear in your heart. Are you ready? Are you taking the trip with me? Can you handle it? Donald Trump is president. Total U.S. student loan debt is $1.6 trillion. In 2018, college grads, their average loan, $29,200 on average. What about violent crime? Huh? What about it? The number of violent crime victims aged 12 or older rose from 2.7 million in 2015 to 3.3 million in 2018, an increase of 604,000 victims. The rate of violent victimizations not reported to police rose from 9.5 per 1,000 persons aged 12 or older in 2015 to 12.9 per 1,000 in 2018. While the rate of violent victimizations reported to police showed no statistically significant change. The rate of rape or sexual assault increased from 1.4 victimizations per 1,000 persons aged 12 or older in 2017 to 2.7 per 1,000 in 2018.
Halloween sucks, Halloween fucking sucks, your costume sucks.
What about climate change? The majority of birds in North America face the threat of extinction. What can we do about it? 2/3 of North American bird species, 389 different species, are at risk of extinction from climate change. There was an independent study that said nearly 3 billion birds have disappeared from the United States and Canada in the past half a century. A lot of this has to do with climate change, and a lot of it has to do with pesticides. What about the most popular baby names of 2019? That's a little scary. That's not something you want to think about. Top baby names so far? Normal ones. Liam, Noah, Elijah. But what about Aiden? Jackson? Carter? Grayson? Wyatt? Jaden? Jackson, spelled Jaxon. Asher. Caleb. Messiah. What about for girls? Oh, you got normal ones like Olivia, Emma, Ava. But what about Arya? What about Madison? What about Riley? What about Bella? That's the name of a dog, not a child. What about Everly? What about Nova? What about Addison? What about obesity in toddlers? In 2016, 13.9% of toddlers aged 2 to 4 had obesity.
Well, I want to thank everybody, very, very special people. And it is true. This is my first stop, officially. We're not talking about the balls, or we're not talking about even the speeches. Although they did treat me nicely on that speech yesterday. I always call them the dishonest media, but they treated me nicely. But I want to say that there is nobody that feels stronger about the intelligence community and the CIA than Donald Trump. There's nobody.
Oof. That is too scary. That is too scary for me. Ooh, man, that was a ride, wasn't it? We went through all kinds of stuff. That was a ride. We took a trip. Spooky. A spooky trip. Oh man, let me tell you, that was something else. I got the willies. I got the willies here. So, my last 15 minutes or so before I right, and we've done a lot tonight, haven't we? We took a little Halloween trip. We went to did a review of the last podcast on the left with Miss Catherine. Very nice. That was very fun. Something I've been wanting to do, and something I thought was interesting, was I've as I talked about on the show, I want to kind of explore the personality of things and explore why people are the way they are and why people act the way they act. And I think part of that has to do with what kind of mental illnesses we have or we don't have. So I wanted to. I think I'm going to focus each week or every few weeks on one and just kind of tell you a little bit about it. And I think one of them I'm going to tell you about, or the first one I'm going to tell you about, is narcissistic personality disorder. So the DSM-4 and the DSM-5, I'll tell you about the DSM-5. That's the most recent one. That's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Health mental health practitioners. And they say that the essential features of a personality disorder are impairments in personality, self and interpersonal functioning, and the presence of pathological personality traits. So, for narcissistic personality disorder, the following criteria must be met, and this is A or B. Significant impairments in personality functioning manifest by A, impairments in self-functioning of identity, which is an excessive reference to others for self-definition and self-esteem, exaggerated self-appraisal, may be inflated or deflated or vacillate between extremes. Emotional regulation mirrors fluctuations in self-esteem. Or Self-direction. Goal setting is based on gaining approval from others. Personal standards are unreasonably high in order to see oneself as exceptional, or too low based on a sense of entitlement. People are often unaware of their own motivation. So you need that, which is impairment in self-functioning, and you need impairments in interpersonal functioning, which is empathy. So, you don't have the ability to recognize or identify with other people's feelings or needs, and or intimacy. So relationships largely superficial and exist to serve self-esteem regulation, mutuality constrained by little genuine interest. And there's also antagonism, which deals with grandiosity, feelings of entitlement, attention seeking, and the like. There's also malignant narcissism. It's just loud. Malignant narcissism. Let's see. So God, I can't think tonight. That includes narcissism. So, but also antisocial behavior, aggression, and sadism. So it's not in the DSM. Narcissism is, but malignant narcissism is. But it's basically narcissism along with antisocial, paranoid, or sadistic personality disorder traits. And it's been found in paranoid people. So who does that remind you of? Who does that remind you of? Does that remind you of a certain president? And every week I say, God, this guy takes up so much of my emotional bandwidth. But, I'm kind of leaning into it. I'm Sheryl Sandberging it a little bit and saying, you know what, this guy sucks. And we gotta, I had to acknowledge it, and maybe I can convince somebody that he sucks, because he does. So Donald Trump is a classic narcissist from what I've read. And he has a big ego. So a lot of times narcissists have a inflated outward ego that they talk, they say, oh, I'm the greatest and there's nobody better. But inside they're fragile people, and they're frightened, and they just put on this facade. So they work hard to keep up their image for themselves and for others. And when faced with anything that would challenge that, they attack, and they are contemptuous and aggressive and envious. And the greater their defensive aggression, the greater is their insecurity. And shame, according to this, what I'm reading from Psych Central, fuels the need for admiration and attention. So they give a ton of quotes about Donald Trump. If I get my name in the papers, people pay attention. That's what matters. Let's see. Some people would say that I'm very, very intelligent. My IQ is one of the highest. All the women on The Apprentice flirted with me. It's very hard for them to attack me on my looks because I'm so good looking. And so they exaggerate the truth. It's all or nothing with narcissists for Donald Trump. He said he doesn't like to lose. So anybody that's not winning is a loser. He says, show me someone without an ego, I'll show you a loser. And that's one of his favorite words, is calling somebody a loser when he's the biggest loser of them all. He just somehow, stumbled his way into an important job just by being a piece of shit. And he says, life to me is a psychological game, a series of challenges you either meet or you don't. They have a my way or the highway attitude. And he learned this from his dad. I guess his dad was a narcissist as well, and just basically beat it into him, probably if not physically, very emotionally. He's incapable of love and intimacy. So the whole Melania thing, all that's for show. I have zero doubt that there is no love between them. There are kids involved at this point, or a kid, and it's really sad. But that's what you get when you're a narcissist and you're the president, and you try to pretend to people that you're a normal person when you're not. So what about treatment? So what do you do about it? There's not a magic pill you can take, but it is, you can do talk therapy, psychotherapy, and medications if you have some kind of concurrent illness or mental illness that goes with it. But they basically say, you got to learn to relate better with people, understand the causes of your emotion, look at areas of change, understand and tolerate issues related to your self-esteem, increase your ability to understand and regulate your feelings, and recognize and accept your actual competence and potential so you can tolerate criticisms or failure. And I think that's hard for people with narcissism because it is a chore to live life as a person who is, better than everybody else. They think they're better than everybody else. And it's a chore to, or I won't say it's a chore. I think it's more of a challenge. That's a better word. It's a challenge for them to admit that there's anything wrong that needs to be fixed, and that it's everybody else's fault, and that there is a need to change, and they don't. So, I don't see Donald Trump getting better anytime soon. I don't see him becoming suddenly a good person or having any kind of self-reflection or becoming any less narcissistic or getting treatment for it. I just don't see it. I don't think it ever will happen because he's too far gone. It's like the guys with schizophrenia that you see year after year downtown, that you've seen those people, and I think even if you scooped them up and got them in a home and got them medicine, they may be too far gone. I don't know. I mean, I think those people have more of a ability to change than Donald Trump does. But Donald Trump's affecting this country in ways that we're going to be feeling for years. So that is the spookiest part of this whole thing. It's that we are at the mercy of this maniac, and this is the world today. But it doesn't have to be. And then after Halloween, after November of 2020, hopefully we can have something different. But until then, we're going to have fun. We're not going to let people take up space in our brain. We're not going to let, or people that we don't want to take up space in our brain. We're going to enjoy our lives. You're going to get enough exercise. You're going to drink enough water, eat enough food, and if you drink, not too much, and don't use it as a crutch. And if you use drugs, hopefully you don't use them as a crutch, and you don't get addicted to them, and you have good interpersonal relationships, and that's how you win. That's how you fight through the fight to live to fight another day. You know what I mean? So so that's that. So we're coming up on an hour. I think this is enough for tonight, and thank you for listening. And I'm just going to sing you out here. You ready for this? You were listening to The Brian Show.
Sometimes
You were just listening to The Brian Show. You're gonna listen to it. Maybe it's not gonna be live, but you might get a good laugh. Maybe you'll learn something in the meantime. Brian Show. It was time for The Brian Show. Listening to The Brian Show. You were listening to The Brian Show. Listening to The Brian Show. Listen to The Brian Show. Thank you, everyone, for listening to The Brian Show.
Halloween sucks, Halloween fucking sucks, your costume sucks.
Good night, everybody.